Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/adventures in audio. Over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Welcome to Adventures in Audio, a podcast featuring short stories by authors like Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, and others. I'm Jack deGollia. To enjoy this podcast to the fullest, it's advised to remove all mental debris from your brain. And once the chasms of your mind are void of all mental contamination, you are ready to enjoy these classic stories. And now here's your host, Robert Crandall.
Greetings, dear friends. I'm Robert Crandall, your host. I'm delighted that you've chosen to join us for this podcast. And we want to remind you, you can find us on directories like iTunes and Stitcher and others under the name Short Stories, with stories has an additional S on the end of it. And you can always find us on our website, adventuresinaudio.net. Thank you for joining us. Each episode, I will read a story of horror, mystery, crime, and related genres. No need to read. I'll read it for you. Just kick back and relax and enjoy. You know, I mentioned before about turning down the lights down low or using a black light to set the mood for listening to the spoken word. I believe, at least for me, to listen to the spoken word is a little different than music. Music, you can just turn it on. It's there and doesn't take any mental conditioning whatsoever. But the spoken word kind of does. And so that's why I say, remove the mental debris and contamination from your mind, and the lights down low, use a black light, etc. Well, I have found something else that helps me, and that is classical music. Recently, I've gotten into classical music, and man, I just can't tell you how much I enjoy it. And it's refreshing. It's perfect for conditioning the mind to listen to the spoken word. So what I do is I listen to about a half hour of classical music, turn on the classical music station here, or there's lots of it on YouTube, and listen for about 30 minutes. And then I go find a podcast to listen to. And, of course, my favorite being this genre of horror and so forth. But I listen to a lot of other podcasts. I think podcasting is just a tremendous thing. There's a podcast about every subject imaginable. It's like, I guess you would call it the digital age, the counterpart to magazines. There's a magazine for everything. And so is there podcasts. There's just thousands of them. So anyway, that's what I do. The classical music, I just recently got into it. I turning the radio dial one day, and there it was, and I just left it there, and it's still there, and it's been about 3 months, and I just can't tell you how much I am enjoying it. And it just helps, not just listening to a podcast, but in driving. I can be in gridlock, and I can listen to my classical music, and I don't care how long the stoplight is or the traffic is stuck. I just don't care. And it's amazing. Because I'm one with, I've been known to be a little impatient, but not with my classical music. I don't care. Traffic will move when it's ready, and it's just amazing. So anyway, it works for me. I thought I'd pass that along in case you want to try it and see if it works for you. You must like listening to stories, or you wouldn't be listening to this now. And I want to ask you again to check out audible.com's free offer. Right now you can sign up for a 30-day free trial and receive a free audiobook. Now, imagine the hours a free audiobook. Most of them are like 10 hours or something. You can get the complete stories of Edgar Allan Poe. The actual title is Edgar Allan Poe, The Complete Stories. And I believe it's about 16 hours. And I can't imagine the plethora of material Edgar Allan Poe wrote in his short lifetime. I think he was 40 when he died. And he wrote all that stuff. Amazing. And with no typewriter or certainly no word processor. What did they use? Did they even have writing instruments? Or was it the feather? Or I don't know. Maybe it's a writing instrument and there's some sort. Remember the old cartridge pens? You put a cartridge in of ink in it. But anyway, it had to be by hand. So what about carpal tunnel? I don't know. It's just amazing to me. I just can't believe it. I think he was 40 years old when he died. So anyway, you can get that book by Poe. You can also get The Dark World of H.P. Lovecraft. And there's another one called Dreams of Terror and Death by H.P. Lovecraft. And that one's about 20 hours. So lots of listening there, and it's free. You can get either one of those audiobooks I just mentioned, and they're free. All you got to do is sign up for the 30-day free trial at Audible. The website is audibletrial.com/adventures in audio. Be sure and put that in there because we get credit for that, and you'll be helping us, and we really appreciate it. There's 150,000 titles. Those are just two. There's also several audiobooks of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and many, many others. And audiobooks are so nice. You can listen in the car. You can listen at home. And they make a great gift. There's just so much. And like I say, over 150,000 titles to choose from. So get your 30-day free trial and a free audiobook. www.audibletrial.com/adventures in audio. And oh, by the way, one more time, I got to get a plug in for me. I'm a voiceover provider if you need a voice for a radio, TV commercial, or corporate narration, documentaries, website narration, or whatever other voice project you might have. Send me an email, robert.c.cat850@gmail.com. And if my voice isn't suitable, I'm crushed. No, not really. I do have friends in the business, and we will get you taken care of. So, now, on with the business at hand. A short story. In this episode, a strange old man is rumored to have vast riches hidden away in his residence. Townspeople fear this mysterious old man. But 3 men decide to separate the old man from his wealth. And when they execute their plan, things don't go well. Let's listen now to The Terrible Old Man by H.P. Lovecraft. It was the design of Angelo Ricci and Joe Sanic and Manuel Silva to call on the terrible old man. This old man dwells all alone in a very ancient house on Water Street near the sea, and is reputed to be both exceedingly rich and exceedingly feeble, which forms a situation very attractive to men of the profession of Messrs. Ricci, Zanuck, and Silva, for that profession was nothing less dignified than robbery. The inhabitants of Kingsport say and think many things about the terrible old man, which generally keep him safe from the attention of gentlemen like Mr. Ritchie and his colleagues, despite the almost certain fact that he hides a fortune of indefinite magnitude somewhere about his musty and venerable abode. He is, in truth, a very strange person, believed to have been a captain of East India clipper ships in his day, so old that no one can remember when he was young, and so taciturn that few know his real name. Among the gnarled trees in the front yard of his aged and neglected place, he maintains a strange collection of large stones, oddly grouped and painted so that they resemble the idols of some obscure Eastern temple. This collection frightens away most of the small boys who love to taunt the terrible old man about his long white hair and beard, or break the small paned windows of his dwelling with wicked missiles. But there are other things which frighten the older and more curious folk who sometimes steal up to the house to peer in through the dusty panes. These folk say that on a table in a bare room on the ground floor are many peculiar bottles, in each a small piece of lead, suspended pendulum-wise from a string, and they say that the terrible old man talks to these bottles, addressing them by such names as Jack, Scarface, Long Tom, Spanish Joe, Peters, and Mate Ellis. And whenever he speaks to a bottle, the little lead pendulum within makes certain definite vibrations, as if in answer. Those who have watched the tall, lean, terrible old man in these peculiar conversations do not watch him again. But Angelo Ritchie, Joe Sanic, and Manuel Silva were not of Kingsport blood. They were of that new and heterogeneous alien stock which lies outside the charmed circle of New England life and traditions. They saw in the terrible old man merely a tottering, almost helpless gray beard, who could not walk without the aid of his knotted cane, and whose thin, weak hands shook pitifully. They were really quite sorry in their way for the lonely, unpopular old fellow, whom everybody shunned, and at whom all the dogs barked singularly. But business is business, and to a robber whose soul is in his profession, there is a lure and a challenge about a very old and very feeble man who has no account at the bank, and who pays for his few necessities at the village store with Spanish gold and silver minted 2 centuries ago. Messrs. Ritchie, Sanic, and Silva selected the night of April 11th for their call. Mr. Ritchie and Mr. Silva were to interview the poor old gentleman, whilst Mr. Zanuck waited for them and their presumed metallic burden with a covered motor car in Ship Street, by the gate in the tall rear wall of their host grounds. Desire to avoid needless explanations in case of unexpected police intrusions prompted these plans for a quiet and unostentatious departure. As prearranged, the 3 adventurers started out separately in order to prevent any evil-minded suspicions afterward. Messrs. Ritchie and Silva met in Water Street by the old man's front gate, and although they did not like the way the moon shone down upon the painted stones through the budding branches of the gnarled trees, they had more important things to think about than mere idle superstition. They feared it might be unpleasant work, making the terrible old man loquacious concerning his hoarded gold and silver. For aged sea captains are notably stubborn and perverse. Still, he was very old and very feeble, and there were two visitors. Messrs. Ritchie and Silva were experienced in the art of making unwilling persons voluble, and the screams of a weak and exceptionally venerable man can be easily muffled. So they moved up to the one lighted window and heard the terrible old man talking childishly to his bottles with pendulums. Then they donned masks and knocked politely at the weather-stained oaken door. Waiting seemed very long to Mr. Zanuck, as he fidgeted restlessly in the covered motor car by the terrible old man's back gate in Ship Street. He was more than ordinarily tender-hearted, and he did not like the hideous screams he had heard in the ancient house just after the hour appointed for the deed. Had he not told his colleagues to be as gentle as possible with the pathetic old sea captain? Very nervously he watched that narrow oaken gate in the high and ivy-clad stone wall. Frequently he consulted his watch and wondered at the delay. Had the old man died before revealing where his treasure was hidden, and had a thorough search become necessary? Mr. Zanuck did not like to wait so long in the dark in such a place. Then he sensed a soft tread or tapping on the walk inside the gate, heard a gentle fumbling of the rusty latch, and saw the narrow, heavy door swing inward. And in the pallid glow of the single dim street lamp, he strained his eyes to see what his colleagues had brought out of that sinister house which loomed so close behind. But when he looked, he did not see what he had expected, for his colleagues were not there at all, but only the terrible old man, leaning quietly on his knotted cane and smiling hideously. Mr. Zanuck had never before noticed the color of that man's eyes. Now he saw that they were yellow. Little things make considerable excitement in little towns, which is the reason that Kingsport people talked all that spring and summer about the 3 unidentifiable bodies, horribly slashed as with many cutlasses, and horribly mangled as by the tread of many cruel boot heels, which the tide washed in. And some people even spoke of things as trivial as the deserted motor car found in Ship Street, or certain especially inhuman cries, probably of a stray animal or migratory bird, heard in the night by wakeful citizens. But in this idle village gossip, the terrible old man took no interest at all. He was by nature reserved, and when one is aged and feeble, one's reserve is doubly strong. Besides, so ancient a sea captain must have witnessed scores of things much more stirring in the far-off days of his unremembered youth. You've been listening to The Terrible Old Man by H.P. Lovecraft. Now that the mental debris has been removed and the chasms of your mind have been purged of contamination and restored with substance, you are ready to rejoin the living. Caution is advised. Much peril awaits. I hope all is well. Thank you.